Browns traded for Ronnie Harrison. Since he's not a household name, there are a lot of people who have a lot of questions about why the Browns did this. Who is this guy that the Browns are getting, and what is his fit with the Cleveland Browns? So let's talk about it. Before this video starts, I want to make sure you guys hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and ding that notification bell so you can be notified when I upload. The NFL season is coming soon. Ravens week is days away, guys. Days away. I got a ton of content, ton of collabs coming up, so you don't want to miss any of that. So make sure you're subscribed, but also make sure you're notified so you don't miss a single thing when those videos drop. So a lot of questions come up about Ronnie Harrison and why in the world did the Browns trade for him? Why did Jacksonville give him up for a 5th-round pick? And again, since this isn't somebody who's a household name, a lot of questions are being asked, a lot of assumptions are being made, and there's also some uncertainty about what kind of player he is and what kind of role he plays. So to shed some light on why Jacksonville decided to trade him, there are a few reasons that I've gathered by looking around at different reports on why the Jacksonville Jaguars went with this route of decision making. And I think it all comes down to this being a preemptive move. Harrison has 2 years left on his rookie deal. Safeties have gotten very expensive in the last few years. Like a guy like Eric Murray, who people don't even remember played on the Browns last year, got paid by Houston. So safeties, even average safeties, are getting paid a ton of money when they hit free agency. So Jacksonville preemptively decided that they don't want to do that and that they have some other players that they like to see in that role. The journeyman veteran Josh Jones seems like who they like to take in that role. So that's what led to Ronnie Harrison being traded. But who is Ronnie Harrison? Ronnie Harrison is a 6'3", 250-pound hybrid safety who primarily plays strong safety. If you remember him from his college years, he played at Alabama alongside Minkah Fitzpatrick. He was a starter for Jacksonville last year. He got some starting snaps the year before, but last year was when he got most of his starting snaps. He played in 79% of all defensive snaps for Jacksonville. So this is somebody who was a starter by default. This is definitely somebody who was a key piece of that defensive back rotation in Jacksonville last year. He's also best in pass defense situations. 55% completion percentage against a 66.8 passer rating on all balls targeted to him. So those are pretty good numbers for a safety. He also has 2 sacks and 2 interceptions. So some production there when you send him to blitz, which is also a plus to have from the strong safety or hybrid safety position. He has a pretty good Pro Football Focus grade in both pass rush and pass coverage. It's a 68. He's also a short tackler, but he's also a poor run defender. So you can be that. I know that's kind of confusing. Some people equate being a poor tackler to being a poor rush defender, but this guy's actually a good tackler. It's a similar situation to Grant Delpit. Grant Delpit has his issues tackling in the box. So does this guy. And honestly, if this profile of a young, tall, athletic safety sounds very familiar, it's because he's pretty much a less athletic version of Grant Delpit. So that's who Ronnie Harrison is. A good, tall, physical coverage, strong safety / free safety, but more of a strong safety who can do really well in pass coverage situations and is not necessarily the best rush defending safety in the world. So let's talk about his fit. Ronnie Harrison is actually a really nice fit in the Cleveland Browns secondary if you look at what the Cleveland Browns are planning to do this year. Because if some of you guys remember when camp was going on and Delpit was still out there before his unfortunate Achilles injury, when you saw Delpit out there, it would be with Sadejo. That means that Delpit was taking first-team snaps at the strong safety position, either in replacement of Carl Joseph or with Carl Joseph, but never without Andy Sadejo. And that alone tells me a ton about the plans for Grant Delpit before he tore his Achilles, and now what the plan is for Ronnie Harrison. This Browns defense is going to be a 4-2-5. They were always going to have more DBs on the field than linebackers, obviously, but more DBs on the field than usual in most situations. So this doesn't come as a surprise, but when I've heard a lot of people talk about this trade, they talk about it as, you know, getting a backup for Carl Joseph or getting a replacement for Andy Sadejo. And I don't think either of those two things are necessarily true when you talk about the fit that this guy is going to have in this defense. I think it's going to be a little bit different, a little bit more nuanced than people are kind of writing it to be. Because when Grant Delpit went down with that Achilles injury, this rotation, I think, lost a key piece, which it didn't have a replacement for on the roster in this defense. And that key piece is what I'm going to call a flex defender. So what's a flex defender in my opinion? Well, it's a taller safety that's pretty good in blitzing situations and also can cover tight ends. Think of it as a inverse to a Tampa 2 linebacker, right? A Tampa 2 linebacker is a linebacker who plays that hybrid between the safety position and the linebacker, right? He's a linebacker, but he can drop back in coverage and kind of split the cover two so that the two safeties have less space to cover and that you have more covered in the seams. It's really good against teams that use a lot of tight ends. I would honestly expect the Browns to actually run into a fair amount of Tampa 2 type defenses or schemes throughout the season because of their heavy use of tight ends. But that's what a Tampa 2 is. Now, that's not the same thing as a flex defender, right? Because this guy is not a linebacker by any means. Grant Delpit was not a linebacker by any means. So it's not the same thing. Instead of having a linebacker who's smaller that can cover more ground, you have a bigger safety who might not be able to cover a lot of ground, but can cover a more versatile array of body types along the line of scrimmage and actually help out in pass rush situations. And this would be exactly what Grant Delpit would be asked to do if he were still healthy. And with this defense, there are some trade-offs because I think you're going to be better against tight ends with somebody like him in that kind of a role. Also, you're going to be better overall in your secondary. You're going to be able to cover for longer. But if the defensive line is not able to give adequate pressure and also be really good against the run, then you're going to run into some issues defending the run because this kind of leaves you vulnerable up the middle because you're going to have less linebackers. And that flex defender, while he might be on the line of scrimmage sometimes, is rarely going to be inside the box, which makes it much different than a Tampa 2. So where does Ronnie fit in on all of this? Well, he's good in coverage and he's a good pass rusher. So he's almost kind of perfect for that kind of a role. He's also 6'3" and 215 pounds, which is more than enough size to be able to defend tight ends in the NFL. So all of those things are kind of going for him. Where you will see him on the field, you will see him either when both Sadejo and Carl Joseph are out there as that flex defender. You will also probably see him in replacement of a Carl Joseph on more pass-heavy downs. So 3rd and long, 2nd and long, you're going to see him because he's better in coverage than Carl Joseph is. And honestly, this fills a Grant Delpit size hole. Now, he's not going to have the potential of Grant Delpit and definitely not going to have the range of Grant Delpit. He's not athletic like Grant Delpit is athletic. So you're going to miss out on some things there. But for the basic function of this defense, he's kind of an essential piece because he allows a lot of the flexibility and the versatility to happen along that secondary that needs to happen with this team's lack of depth at linebacker and lack of depth in the interior defensive line. You kind of need the secondary to be versatile and strong in order to do so. It's also a really good deal that the Browns got. A guy like him for a 5th-round pick in 2021 for a team, the Cleveland Browns, who hope to make the playoffs this year. That's a pretty solid deal, right? You're not giving up too much. You got extra picks in this year's draft anyways. Everybody knows that the Browns have spent enough time drafting players at this point. They don't really have any use for a 5th-round pick. So it makes a ton of sense that they made this trade with Jacksonville. And it kind of makes sense on Jacksonville's point because the value for this guy is probably not going to be any higher than it is right now. So they sold high on him. Now, how much does this change with the defense? It changes some things, right? I think the defense is going to look a little bit better at the end of the season and maybe in the mid parts of the season. I still think they're going to struggle at the beginning of the season because the secondary is still flawed. This is not going to do much against the run except for maybe you'll allow Carl Joseph to be that flex defender on run-heavy downs and get him closer to the line of scrimmage, which actually might help out with the linebacking holes. But other than that, it's not going to make a massive difference in this team's issues with stopping the interior run. And also the secondary problems, in my opinion, weren't really personnel related. It wasn't a lack of personnel. It was a lack of chemistry on that secondary because, again, nobody's healthy at the same time on that secondary throughout camp. And that's been a big issue. Greedy Williams is still out with that shoulder injury, and he's still day-to-day. You know, you haven't had time to stack up reps with these guys and get the communication down pat because that was also a big problem when you saw this first-team secondary out there in a scrimmage. So, no, this is not going to solve all of the Browns' problems, but it is going to make this secondary fit a lot better than it has since Grant Delpit went down. But that's my thoughts on the Ronnie Harrison trade. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. But again, guys, thank you guys for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.